You know, for thousands of years, we've told the story of the Trojan War as this grand, almost mythic epic of heroes and gods. But what if we looked at it a little differently? What if we treated it as, well, the first great military case study, like a timeless laboratory for strategy, leadership, and the brutal, messy realities of command? That's exactly what we're going to do.
This quote from military strategist Isaiah Wilson III, man, it just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? The story we always hear is the story of Achilles, the glorious, the unstoppable, the wrathful warrior. But there's a whole other story, another grave, and another model of leadership that we've kind of ignored, the story of Hector.
And by really digging into this ancient conflict, we can unearth some incredibly sharp and frankly super relevant lessons for leaders today. We're going to examine the archetypes, the fatal flaws, and the huge strategic pivots that ultimately decided one of history's most legendary wars.
All right, let's dive right in. Here's our game plan. First, we'll break down the two completely opposite leadership models of Achilles and Hector. Then, we're going to widen the lens to look at the full spectrum of command styles in the war. After that, we'll analyze the critical, game-winning shift to irregular warfare, and finally, we'll pull it all together with the key lessons for modern leaders.
Okay, first up, the archetype that has pretty much dominated Western military thought for centuries, Achilles. He's the ultimate warrior, the star performer, whose entire approach to conflict is built on one thing and one thing only: overwhelming, unstoppable force.
So, the Achilles doctrine, it's actually pretty simple and honestly kind of seductive. It believes that victory is all about pure tactical and technical superiority. It's the philosophy of shock and awe, where the goal isn't just to win, but to completely obliterate your opponent so that your glory can never ever be questioned.
But what's really fascinating here is that Achilles' value went way beyond just being good with a spear. I mean, the guy was a true strategic asset. His reputation alone was basically psychological warfare. He commanded the Myrmidons, who were like the elite special forces of their day, and his relentless pursuit of excellence, well, that set the standard for the entire Greek army.
But here's the catch. This is what we call the Achilles trap. See, a strategy built entirely on individual glory and unrestrained power is incredibly fragile. It's powered by ego, not by duty. And as this quote kind of hints at, power that believes it's invincible often ends up just burning itself out.
All right, so now let's flip the script. Let's go across the battlefield to that other grave at Troy. Leading the defense of the city is Hector, and he represents a profoundly different philosophy of command, one that's rooted not in glory, but in service.
The Hectorian doctrine, it's not about annihilation, it's all about preservation. Hector doesn't fight for personal honor. He fights to protect his family, his city, his entire way of life. His goal is strategic durability, making sure that even if he falls, the community he serves will live on. It's a model of real strategic maturity.
And this just brilliantly shows how Hector's strengths were fundamentally different. He was a coalition builder. His leadership was protective, focused on holding society together. He valued resiliency over recklessness. And maybe most importantly, he was emotionally integrated. He knew exactly what and who he was fighting for.
So when you boil it all down, here's the crucial point. Achilles embodies this ethic of dominance, but with no real responsibility. When he finally comes back to the fight, it's not for Greece, it's for personal revenge. Hector, on the other hand, operates from an ethic of loyalty and duty. His every single action is tied to the survival of his people.
But it wasn't just Achilles versus Hector. The Trojan War presents this incredibly rich tapestry of leadership styles. It gives us a full spectrum of command, from just profound arrogance to this quiet, tragic humility.
So here we can see three totally distinct ways of leading. First, you've got Agamemnon, the big boss of the Greeks, who led purely through his rank and title, what we'd call positional authority. Then on the Trojan side, there's King Priam, whose leadership was all about empathy and personal relationships. And then finally, you have a guy like Odysseus, whose authority was based on something completely different: his brain, his analytical skill.
This table gives us a fantastic, at-a-glance breakdown. I mean, just look at the stark contrasts here. Hector scores the highest on integrity, while Agamemnon is scraping the bottom. Odysseus, he stands out for his analytical decision-making, which is a clear counterpoint to Achilles' totally emotional reactions. And check out the humility metric. The two great warriors, Achilles and Agamemnon, have the lowest scores, while the servant leader Hector and the empathetic father Priam score the highest. That tells you a lot, right?
Yeah, nothing captures the total failure of Agamemnon's leadership like this moment. By publicly humiliating his most valuable asset, Achilles, just out of pure ego, he almost lost the entire war. This is a perfect, and I mean perfect, example of how positional authority, when it's used to diminish people instead of empowering them, just becomes toxic.
But on the complete other extreme, you have King Priam, and he shows us that good intentions just aren't enough. His empathy for his family was a great strength, sure, but it became a fatal weakness when he failed to hold his son Paris accountable for starting the whole mess. Empathy without accountability can be just as destructive as straight-up arrogance.
So for almost 10 years, the Greeks' conventional strategy, this pure force-on-force siege, was failing, miserably. The walls of Troy held strong. Victory wasn't going to come from more force. It required a complete, radical shift in how they thought about the war.
10 years, an entire decade of just bloody, grinding warfare. This number, right here, represents the total failure of the Achillean doctrine. It proved that sheer force, technical supremacy, and individual heroism were simply not enough to break a resilient, well-defended enemy.
The deadlock could only be broken by changing the rules of the game, and this is where Odysseus, the master of analytical authority, steps up. He recognized that if they couldn't just break down the front door, they had to find another way in. They had to pivot from conventional to irregular warfare.
And this just brilliantly lays out the tactical genius of the plan. It's a textbook masterclass. It starts with strategic deception, with psychological operations. Then it moves to infiltration and sabotage by a small, elite special ops team. And then, and this is the crucial part, that irregular action enables the final decisive blow by the conventional army. It's beautiful.
So after taking apart this whole conflict, what are the big takeaways for today's commanders and leaders? What does this ancient war really teach us about how to succeed in our own complex, messy world?
Is the answer to be the unstoppable warrior like Achilles, the dutiful protector like Hector, or the cunning strategist like Odysseus? Well, the war teaches us that relying on any single one of these archetypes is probably a path to failure.
The most crucial lesson from Troy is that real strategic mastery requires integration. The ideal commander, the ideal leader, combines the tactical excellence and high standards of Achilles with the integrity and resilience of Hector and the intellectual agility and innovative thinking of Odysseus. It's not about being one of them. It's about figuring out how to be all three.
And in the end, maybe this is the Trojan War's most enduring lesson. Power, whether it's on a battlefield or in a boardroom, is not an end in itself. Its real value, its true legacy, is measured by how it's used, to serve, to protect, and to build something that actually lasts.